Yeah.
Maybe 1% erosion every year for 8 years. Maybe right.
Yeah.
You look back in 13, 70 was about 75%. But we're in that 77, 78% now.
Oh, there it is. It's under.
Yeah, we're tracking it every year. The biggest thing that we're looking we'll have to talk about it in meetings.
Okay, it's 3 o'clock. We will call the regularly scheduled Hutchinson Utilities Commission meeting to order. Does anyone have a conflict of interest to declare?
None.
Yeah, I'll declare a conflict. Sorry, I'm just pulling this up right now. Designating depositories of funds. I'm going to declare a conflict due to my employment at Citizens Bank, which is on the list of depositories.
Okay, so you'll abstain from voting?
I will abstain from voting on agenda item 2F.
Okay, very good. Anything else? All right, then we will go to commission reorganization. Item 2, we will combine A, B, and C. For President Matt Cheney coming in on reorganization, Anthony as Vice President, and then myself as Secretary. Does anyone care to make a motion for those positions?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Bob and Anthony. Any discussion to be had before we vote? No? You're not going to get out? Anything to add?
No?
Mark, Jeremy?
Nothing.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, those are set. Next, we need to appoint legal counsel.
I'll make a motion to appoint Mark Sabora as legal counsel.
I'll second.
All right, motion by Anthony and second by Matt to appoint Mark Sabora as legal counsel. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And we need a motion to appoint the recording secretary.
So moved.
Who?
Well, let's nominate Angie Radke.
I'll second it.
All right, motion by Matt and second by Bob to appoint Angie Radke as the recording secretary. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, now item 2F, designate depository funds for the utility. We have Citizens Bank and Trust, Wells Fargo Bank, Wells Fargo Bank Advisors, or Wells Fargo Advisors, Home State Bank, Morgan Stanley, and Cetera Investment Services. Anyone care to make a motion to approve those?
I'll make the motion to approve.
I'll second.
All right, motion by Bob and second by Matt to approve those depository institutions. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And please note in the minutes that Anthony abstained. All right, consent agenda. Anything to pull out or a motion to approve?
I have no questions. I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second that.
All right, motion by Anthony and second by Matt to approve the consent agenda. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, Jeremy, financial statements.
So before I get into financials, just talk a little bit about kind of where things are at year end. And Angie passed out this 2020 load duration curve. Usually it's right on the financial statements every year, but I had her blow it up a little more so you guys could see it. But we track this. Dan keeps track of this every year. He looks at it primarily to see how much of the baseload contract is a percent of our overall load for the year. So he's been tracking this because if we have certain times throughout the year where our load isn't at 25 megawatts, we end up selling the power back onto the market. So he looks at from what percentage of the overall baseload contract that we have, do we have excess? And so you can see based on how he derives the graph that we had 540 megawatt hours in 2020 that fell below the 25 megawatts. Obviously, typically that's usually at night when the load is low. Again, 3M is pretty consistent. They're in the 12 to 13 megawatt range, but everyone else, commercial businesses, residential, if there's load there, we'll fall below that 25 megawatts. This was a conversation we had quite a while back when I first got on the utilities up here. We tried reorging the baseload contract from a couple of different reasons. One, because this baseload contract is such a high percentage of our overall load, it gives us less ability to reduce our operating costs as far as power supply. When you've got 75 to 70% of your load already locked up. As during that time, obviously they went, structure the baseload contract down to 20 megawatts or something like that. So that 25 megawatt contract we have is in place till 2046. If you guys remember, we did not do an extension on that. Most of the other full requirement members of MRS, they did an extension out to 2057. But the 3 utilities that are not full requirement have not done that. So at this point, we're locked into that until 2046. So that's a piece that Dan and I keep a look at. One, he primarily looks at it from, what are we selling back into the market? Obviously, we're buying it for more than what we're selling it for at those times, and so we're taking a little bit of loss that's rolled into our power supply cost. I look at it predominantly to see how much of a percentage of our baseload contract is tied up in that baseload contract. So, the more percentage that we have tied up, the less we can use local generation for to hedge against the markets, and the less market purchases, that we can buy, which are right now significantly lower than our baseload contract. So it's important for you guys just to keep this graph in mind as far as what percentage of our baseload power is already locked up and what ability we have to really lower that significantly. So, but it's a good thing to kind of keep an eye on kind of where things are at with load. Obviously 2020, with the pandemic and some of our commercial side of things being closed down, you see obviously we had less load. The numbers that he shows in here are not the billable kilowatt hours, it's the total system load that comes into our meters. Obviously there's energy loss and things of that nature that happen, and there's things that we don't bill for, like our own substations and our own facilities. We don't bill ourselves for that, so those things get pulled out. So they look at it from the total amount of load relative to what you guys are seeing on the financial statements, which is what we're billing out to our customers. So you will see there's a little bit of difference there, but the trend is the same for that, so it's just something good to keep in mind. Any questions on that load duration curve?
In the back of my mind, I seem to remember somebody at one point telling me that the fundamentals of hedging say we should have about 70% of our power supply locked up in long term, and we're at 74 to 78%. Does that sound familiar to you, Jeremy?
Yeah, right now in the natural gas side, we have about 80% of our load locked up in natural gas contracts. On the energy side of things, electricity, I would actually like to see us, I wish we'd be more like around 60% locked up in a long-term contract. I think that's a better spot for us on the electric side of things, where you have about 40%. You can use generation, or you can do market sales. So we are at what I would say are a little bit long on contracted sales long-term, but that's the contract that we got into a while back. It originally had been 15 megawatts, and then we stepped it up to 20 and then up to 25 back then. Now, I guess what I will say about the 25 megawatts, during that time, a lot of things we had a higher load as well. HJTDK was running 4 megawatts an hour. We had a little bit more significant commercial industrial load. There was less energy conservation, some of those things. So that 25 megawatts was right around that 75, 72%. You can kind of split hairs on 5-10% either way. I just think where the markets are at now and how flexible the industry is going and the renewables, I think a better number, if we had the ability, would be in that 60% range.
And we can't do anything about the baseload amount. We tried
we can't. Correct.
So we really have to look at growing our load.
Right.
When did we enter that contract?
This one was 2010. The revised one, we went to 25 megawatts, was 2010.
And honestly, it probably took a couple of years to get there, so they probably started working on it a couple of years before 2010.
Correct.
I would guess.
The biggest reason why MRS will not restructure the contract is because they'd have to do it for all their customers, and because they've got significant bonds and debt outstanding. They need the consistent revenue stream to back up the debt. So they're never going to be in a position to restructure, their members' contracts where they have any ability to lose revenue stream, because that's what's backing the bonds and the debt that they take out for all their facilities. So
I would imagine that they'd be willing to listen when we get a lot closer to that time frame to lower the load, but extend out the contract again, perhaps. But that's not going to be any of our conversations to have.
as far as you know.
Yeah, I guess we can come back.
They're always willing to listen. Just might not like some of the answers you get back, but
Yeah, that's good information.
so it's just good to keep track of, kind of in your mind. As far as the financial statements, 2020, relatively speaking, with all the things that have happened this past year, ended up being pretty coming out pretty well financially. Obviously, if you look at just the combined, we're about $1 million, just under $1.2 million above 2019. Now, if you take out the one-time refund that we got and then the insurance proceeds of about $363,000, so you're about $1.6 million in revenue that we typically aren't getting. You're about 1.8, 1.9 in net income in the year. So just a hair below 2019 from the 2.2, but still relatively good, all things considered. Again, we've talked a little bit about market sales. On the electric side of things, that's where your, the sales for resales. We didn't meet the budget by about $300,000. That's all attributed to market sales. I had about $525,000 budgeted, and we only had about $250,000 in market sales. Some of it was just the market prices were so low, it didn't pay for us to generate, even in some of the peak times. And then obviously we had units 6 and 7 weren't up and fully operational, so we lost some ability to do some runtime with some of that. So I did back that down for 2021 to $425,000. We'll see if we can reach that this year with units 6 and 7 going in. We'll see how that goes. Those should be up and running by this summer, full speed. So we'll see if we can capture some market sales there. As far as on the purchase power side of things, we came in significantly below budget. On the purchase power side of things, the biggest thing there was just market purchases. Had about $1.6 million budgeted for market purchases, and we only ended up spending about $923,000. So we came in about $740,000 below budget on buying power. We actually, our purchase price on average for market purchases in 2020 was $18.27. 2019 it was $26, so we shaved $8 off a megawatt. So that should give you guys a little indication of where some of these market prices are going. There's more renewables going in the market, there's a lot of wind going in, and so they're pricing in that stuff relatively cheap because they're selling the attributes off that, they're selling the RECs and things, so that's where their revenue streams are coming in. So they don't necessarily need to make a significant amount of money on the power itself because they're selling the renewable credits. That's part of it. Two other pieces that played into it this year were really natural gas prices were significantly down in 2020. They started trending that way in 2019. So even when natural gas generation was running, that stuff was relatively low cost for that. If we had our generators up and running at $2 gas, we could run our units for about $18 units. So when we get those things running, those are very competitive relative to the price we're paying. So those would be good. And then the other piece was just there was more supply than there was demand with stuff being shut down. When the sun's shining, the solar's pushing into the market. When it's windy at night, it's pushing in the market. And when stuff is shut down for 3, 4, 5 months, you got way more supply than demand, so that also put downward pressure on the market. So a lot of those things helped as far as us saving cost and the additional power we needed to buy above the baseload contract. So that helped. The flip side of that is we lost revenue because we didn't have to do it. We didn't have to increase the power cost adjustment to cover those costs, and so you'll see that same, I guess, adverse effect on the customer revenue is we didn't have anywhere near the power cost adjustments we did to our customers, which is a good thing because we didn't have to pay as much for power. So that was a big thing for 2020. Transmission costs were down a little bit. Again, our loads were down a little bit. Some of our demand charges weren't as high as they typically have been because we had a lot of stuff shut down, so we saved some money on the GRE zone. Generator fuel is down. We were below budget on that because we just weren't running as much. And then a lot of our operating expenses were down, strictly related to the pandemic. We didn't have a lot of training going on. We didn't have a lot of outside services. We just didn't have people in our facilities to help, do some work and things of that nature. So we saved a bunch of money on the operating side of things as well. CIP was down because things were shut down. So even though our revenues were fairly flat for the most part, we saved a significant amount of money on the operating expense side. On the electric side, gas was fairly consistent all year for the most part. We never did make up the consumption. We ended the year about 6% below sales from last year, billable sales. We were at 6% below 19 after March. It was a warmer January, February, March of this year, and we never made up the ground. I was hoping October, November, December would be colder, where we'd make some of that back up, but it just never happened. So we ended up trending about 4 to 6% all year long through that. But purchased gas was down a little bit as well, and obviously when that's down and our consumption is down 6%, our revenues are down. We're just not selling as much gas. But overall, still fairly strong financials for the most part. Relatively speaking, I did have Jared run me the outstanding accounts receivable aging reports for this year, obviously because we're still not shutting people off and we're still not charging fines and fees. We're only up about 10% from last year, so at the end of 19, we were at about $98,000 of uncollectibles, and this is 60 days and older stuff. At the end of this year, about $112,000, so over $14,000 increase. I can tell you that's significantly better than any utility I've talked to. I'm on that, so what I will say is our customers in town are good customers. They try to do the right things if they can. They try to make their payments on their bills. They understand that, you know, we have bills to pay as well, and so we have a good customer base here, both in the business sector and the residential sector. And so even though it's up a little bit, it's not significantly up relative to what I'm hearing, not only in the Minnesota with the other utilities, but also nationwide. So from that perspective, we aren't seeing as huge of a detriment with, you know, the non-shutoffs and things of that nature as a lot of utilities are. So.
How long does that policy last? Do you know?
Well, the federal government, they tried inserting into this last legislative cycle here just recently a true moratorium on that to disallow utilities from shutting off. That didn't go anywhere. It made it to the committee hearing, and then it basically didn't go anywhere because all the utilities nationwide are doing it voluntarily. The state here will not look to put that language in as long as we're doing it all voluntarily. And so I don't anticipate them putting that officially in some type of law until the pandemic is officially considered over. But the longer that goes on, the bigger talking point is how are utilities going to get reimbursed for these collectibles? Because a lot of the industry now is fearing once we can start shutting people off, they're not going to have the money to pay these bills. And so are we just going to have to write this debt off? Are we going to get some assistance from the governments to make us whole? Where does that go? Now, we're not in a bad position, relatively speaking, but some of the bigger utilities around the country, Duke Energy, Xcel, some of these people, they got $15, $20 million of uncollectibles, $30 million. Xcel did try to go to the PUC with rate increases for the next 5 years, and they basically said, not until this stuff gets under control with the economy and the pandemic, we're not going to allow you guys to do any rate increases, but they're already anticipating. I think they were projecting a 26% increase over 5 years. So they're going to be looking to do that, as a lot of these utilities are, if they're not going to get some assistance or some relief somehow. So.
And from an outsider perspective, I've been watching like foreclosure moratoriums and eviction moratoriums and so on, and those have continued to get extended out.
Right, to September, right?
I believe so.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think you're staring at back half of 21 at the earliest on those sort of items, and probably can be viewed in a similar vein to what Jeremy's talking about now.
Yeah, I don't anticipate this first half of the year. You know, when I set the 2021 budget, I backed down a lot of the fees, the penalty, all that stuff only for 6 months. So I already anticipated that at least the first 6 months of this year, that's still going to be in play. I'm on that. We're just going to see if it gets extended further than that. On that. So, any questions on the financials? The balance sheet looks pretty good. Obviously, we increased our net position. We increased cash balance. Obviously, you guys have looked at that. Our long-term debt liabilities are down, so a lot of our ratios are looking really good, or are trending positively relative year over year. So otherwise, we're in pretty good financial shape.
I just had one question on the P&L, Jeremy. You had negative interest income for the month, negative 40,000. Any idea why that is?
Those all those year-end adjustments, mark-to-market values, and accrued interest and all that gets booked in December.
Okay.
If you go back to typically the Decembers, I don't typically have those ready to go for Jared until after these are printed, but I got them in before I ran these reports and did stuff, so that's why you're seeing all those things in there.
So the year-to-date number should be spot on with however it shakes out.
Yeah, unless they find some audit adjustment. Accrued interest, obviously accrued interest was down because rates are down, but our mark-to-market values actually went up this year. They went negative last year, we actually were positive. A lot of it had to do with the Cetera stuff that we have. We have a lot of, we bought some of that premium, but a lot of that stuff is full 5% interest rates. And so their mark-to-market adjustments are high, right, relative to what interest rates are. So we actually had a positive adjustment this year. So the only thing that you don't see in the Decembers right now are a lot of those OPEB pension benefits that need to get done. The auditors usually make that adjustment, but they're waiting for the stuff from the state based on what their interest income investments were. That really changes what the liabilities are, if it goes positive or negative, and what they're earning on the pension dollars that are there. So that's the big one that needs to get done. Otherwise, most of the stuff is in. The fixed asset stuff, for the most part, is in. Yeah, so the auditors just left today. They're anticipating coming out for the March for the presentation, so we'll be done here real quick. So they were in and out in 3 days with field work here. So the staff did a good job getting everything to them and getting what they needed. So.
Okay. Any other questions for Jamie? Comments on the?
I'll make a motion to approve the financial statements.
I'll second the motion.
Motion by Matt, second by Bob to approve the financial statements. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Takes us to item 5, open forum. Don't have any visitors here today, so we move on to communication. And Mark, do you have anything to share today?
I don't.
All right. Back to you, Jeremy.
A couple things, just mentioned the audit. Anticipate March as the presentation time frame. I did send you guys legislative updates. Obviously, we're getting in the full cycle with the federal and state legislation. Did anyone have any questions on some of the general updates I sent out? Kind of general initiatives? Okay.
Thank you for the update. It's always good to get those.
Yeah, I'll keep trying to send those to you on a probably bi-weekly basis. Things. I did send you guys out just a general template or framework for the citizen survey, so just kind of keep thinking about that over the next month or two on what type of framework you'd like, what types of questions you guys would like to see answered, or at least think about some of those things, and we can keep that piece moving forward this year. I guess my envision would be to have this thing sent out sometime this summer, get those responses back, get that information compiled, go back through it with the board, and have that done before we run into the strategic planning meeting. I would anticipate sometime early fall, late summer, early fall, for a strategic planning meeting right before we go into crafting the CIPs and the budgets and things of that nature. So that's the general timeframe I have in my mind. If you guys have a different time frame you'd like to be under, let me know.
Jeremy, on that citizen survey, are we going to do one survey and send it out to residential rate payers? Are we going to do 2 or 3 different surveys and send it out to the different rate classes so we get feedback on each of the classes, or what's the practice for?
Oh, I think we can do it whatever way we want. Typically, they send them out to the residential is typically what you see in those types of surveys, because they understand that a lot of the commercial people that work in these businesses are also residential customers. But if we really want something tailored to the commercial sector, then we want to add some of those types of questions in there and have those things sent out to the commercial sector. So really, it's up to how we want to define what we're looking for and what sector of the community we want to send that to.
What percentage of our meters are residential, electric? 80 plus?
Yeah, I would say about 80%. I'd say 5,700 out of the 7,000, yeah. We could certainly, a lot of our top 25 customers, we could certainly do direct solicitation ourselves of those questions and have them fill it out too. We wouldn't necessarily need to have that run through, but we certainly can too. If there's particular programs that we want to see that may be structured to the commercial side, not the residential. But so it's really open to what we want to do and the framework we want to put together, and they'll help kind of guide us along as far as how we craft the questions. When I did talk to them, they said you don't want to get any longer than a 3-page report, because then you won't get good participation. If people perceive it takes too long to fill out a survey, it's going to go in the garbage. So the general one I sent you was after about an hour and a half of talking through that, of going through some of those surveys when I was at the city. You want to make it very succinct, quick to fill out, but things that you can also baseline every year, every couple of years. So those are things I'd want you to think about too, is unless outside of some specific programs that you may want to look to institute, think of other questions that you want to be able to baseline that are important to you guys. Again, is it reliability? Is it customer service? Is it ease of getting services put in town? Whatever that is that you guys want to have baseline and see, are we improving? Are we staying status quo? Are we getting worse? Think about those things too. So I just wanted to get you guys thinking about those general types of things as we move forward. Otherwise, a lot of legislative stuff. I got MMUA legislative rally on February 10th. I've got that coming up. I've got the APPA one, March 1st and 2nd. That's coming up. Finishing up reviews for the staff. Unit 6 has been fixed. They put on a new OMD system, oil mist detection system. So they installed that about 3 weeks ago. Our unit ran all day. So that we think that's fixed. We think that's ready to go now.
That's the first time we've had it run all day?
Yep, it's the first time we've run all day. The issue that they're running is they couldn't adjust the sensors to be less sensitive. And really, in fact, they don't want to reduce the sensitivity because you want those sensors to read when things are going wrong. Otherwise, you run the issue of internal issues going on with your pistons and all that stuff. So they redesigned a whole new OMD detection system, took out the old one, and they started at 8 o'clock that morning, and Randy stopped in at 2 and hadn't stopped, and I talked to him the next day, and it had run all day. So the second one for Unit 7 should be finished up today, he told me. And then we had, as we were running Unit 6, we had a seal leak in one of the pumps in our water tower. So we have to wait for the seal to come in. So even though Unit 7 will be ready to run, we won't be able to run that until the seal comes and we can fix the pump. So we didn't have one of those in inventory. Usually those seals don't go out. Of course, it happens when we're trying to run these things. So, but I guess the good thing is it's not summertime, and so we have a little bit of time. But he's hoping that the seal will be out here in the next week. I'll get that installed and then go run Unit 7 and see if that works. But
So then
knock on wood, these things should be ready to go.
And then the warranty period starts, because that hasn't started yet, right?
Yeah, we'll finalize it. We'll have to get the 1,000 hours on first,
Okay.
and then we'll sign off, and then we'll do our final payment, and then the warranty will start from there. So,
Okay.
so we'll have a little bit of time, but we are going to depreciate these things. We're going to start depreciating these things this year already, even though we got, I think, less than 1% of the contract left. So I talked to the auditors about there's no sense leaving it work in progress when we have $90,000 left on $16 million project. So let's get these on the book and start depreciating them. So you'll see depreciation will be higher in 2021 than what I budgeted, because I only put in 6 months of depreciation, but we're just going to start depreciating them and getting them on work in progress. So they'll still be in the balance sheet, but you'll see higher depreciation on the income statement this year. Otherwise, those are kind of the updates. You got Jared's update, and Dave's was in there. And, so moving along.
Okay. Any questions?
No.
Thank you, Jeremy. Policies, we had a couple for review. No recommended changes on any other policies. Section 8, no unfinished business. So takes us to 9, new business. We have requisition 8631, a 2020 Ram 3500 cab and chassis.
So this is one of our CIP items. As we added a worker in the water or the natural gas division, we added in this new vehicle so that they have a service truck that they can use out and about. We have $75,000 budgeted between this requisition 8631 and the next one. It'll come in at just under 71,000, so it came in a little bit lower than what we had budgeted for in the CIP. But as customary for these things, they're state bids and they take a while to get in, so we're just asking for you guys to approve requisition 8631 to start the process of getting these things ordered.
Move to approve requisition 008631.
I'll second.
All right, motion by Anthony and second by Matt to approve requisition 8631. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, requisition 8635. Right, mine.
This is the second half of the truck. You can't do them in one, they gotta come in parts, so.
The work half.
Yeah, the work cap.
Yeah.
True. So we're asking you to approve the actual utility body that goes on the chassis. Typically, we get the chassis and the truck in first, and then the body comes months later. So if we have this by the end of the year, by fall, we'll probably be sitting good. But we gotta start the process, so.
All right.
I'll make a motion to approve requisition 008635.
I'll second it.
All right, motion by Matt, second by Bob for requisition 8635. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, requisition 8632, directional drill.
So this is our workhorse for the utilities. This is the one piece of equipment that we have that puts in all of our services. So just kind of recap back when I started, we actually had multiple pieces of equipment that we had between different divisions, and we consolidated all those down into one larger boring machine that gets used by both divisions. So a lot of times if we're out in new developments or new areas, we're boring not only electric, but we're boring the gas at the same time, and we got both crews working in the same area doing that. So we originally had budgeted in a new drilling machine and then all the other pieces of equipment that come with it. Of course, Dave and I sat and we talked about it. A lot of the other ancillary pieces of equipment, the trailer, the water tank, the mixer, all those things are still in good shape, and they're compatible with the drill that we're asking you guys to approve today. So we're going to keep those things for several years until they get to a point where they're just not functional anymore. So we're going to keep those original ones here, but we are asking you guys to approve the new directional drill. We did have $167,000 budgeted with the trade-in value of the 2014. It's going to come in about $121,000, so it'll be just under $45,000 under budget from what we put in the CIP. So
So is that actually a trade-in with the dealer?
correct. Yep. So we'll send this one back to Vermeer. They'll give us $53,000 in value to go against the new one. So the net cost to us, even though we're approving the rec for the 166, the net cost will be 121.04, which is in the rec down there.
What's the average lifetime on a piece of equipment like that?
Well, they'll take this old one in, they'll refurbish it, and then they'll sell it. What they typically do is they'll sell to you areas that don't put in the type of linear foot that we do.
Yeah.
And they'll sell it as, hey, we've refurbished it, we've changed out the internal parts, the way you guys are using, you might get another 10 years out of it. But we have had some issues with, we have some things that we've had to repair internally on the machine already. And of course, it's the only machine that we have. And so if that thing goes down, we don't put services in, so.
So when they put the power in my new building, I'm pretty sure a bit broke about halfway to my building, so it caused a lot of problems.
A lot of mechanical stuff on the
Yeah.
inside, the drilling pieces, and so, yeah, those things go down quite a bit.
Well, I mean, you said it's kind of like the workhorse for us too, so I mean, that's why I was wondering how long of a lifetime it actually has, because you use a lot.
Yeah, we kind of watch anywhere between 7 and 10 years.
Yeah.
They tell us for the type of stuff that you're putting in and how much you're using it. And we put in over 3-4 miles of utility service, which is hard to believe that you put that much in. But they say you should get a good amount, 7 to 10 years out of this without major issues.
Huh.
We do carry some of the drilling bits and some of those things on hand, but we don't carry a ton of that stuff. And it's getting harder and harder to lease or contract if it goes down. People just don't have those get around, and if they have to shuffle around, then they charge us an arm and a leg to use it temporarily until ours gets fixed. So what we've been finding with this one, as you start these last couple of times, you get to that 7-year range. That's a good time to get it sold, to get it refurbished, get the new piece in.
You're getting good value for the existing one. Will it come
Well,
in
that's what I
before
was
spring?
thinking. Yeah.
Correct.
Will it come in before spring?
Yes, it's already here.
Oh, okay.
Yep. Or they've got that model in stock.
Sure.
So, and that's why we didn't go for other quotes, because we're gonna still use all the other existing stuff, and this is the only one that works with that fits our trailer. So, yeah, they've been pretty good to work with us. They give us good value on our stuff. We keep it maintained on those things, so.
Very good. Any other questions?
Oh, I'll make her to approve requisition 8632.
I'll second.
Motion by Matt, second by Anthony to approve requisition 8632. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, requisition 8636, CEM equipment.
So this was a CIP item budgeted this year. We budgeted 70,000. It came in actually below budget. You can see the quotes there. The one that we're asking you guys to approve is for Control Analytics. It's basically our data logger system. It's a system that houses all of our data and records every time we're running these units, what the emissions are, what the run times are. It's basically all the information that we need to submit to MPC and the EPA. So we take all that stuff out of the systems, we log it in all the reporting forms, and we submit that. And that's how they tell us, hey, you're below on your permits, you're above your permits, we charge you extra, all those sorts of things. So like a lot of the stuff that we've had around here over the years, we've used a lot of these types of systems for a long time, and we've patched a lot of things. But it gets to a point where all these things aren't being supported. It's just like the SCADA system. They're no longer supporting it. It's an old system. They're no longer updating those things. This is one of those cases where they just aren't supporting it anymore. They basically told us you need to find something else because if it breaks or it doesn't run, we're not going to give you support anymore to house that data. So we knew it was coming up. We were hoping to get a few more years out of it, but it just didn't work. So this will be the new system that we're going to run. It is the cheaper, it's obviously the cheapest one. A lot of the users that have systems like ours, engines and stuff, they say it works well. It's supported very well, and so we don't have any concerns about making the transition to Control Analytics. So we're asking you to approve the new data logger system for the plant.
You know how old our current system is?
Yeah, I want to say it's almost 30 years old.
30?
Yeah. Which is newer than our switches, newer than our older system, than our SCADA systems. I think those were.
Has technology changed in 30 years?
I wouldn't want to try to do my job how they did 30 years ago.
Oh, man.
And all that, so.
Yeah, a lot of the systems we ran here, I mean, they've worked well over the years. They're just.
It's time.
It's time. I mean, that's the transition with the SCADA and all that. At some point, you know, you're gonna have to make the major changeover in your software systems, and so it just happens to be that we're kind of doing them all in relatively the same time frame. But that's a risk if you don't do those things, right? Same with the SCADA system. You run risks of running your systems.
Good. Any questions?
I'll make a motion to approve requisition 8636 with Control Analytics, Inc.
I'll second it.
All right, motion by Anthony and second by Bob to approve 8636 and the Control Analytics bid at $53,794. Total project cost $57,000. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, requisition 8638, the Power Plant 2 Transformer Pad, progress billing.
So this is one of several that will be coming down the pike for this plant 2 kind of update. So a jerky had come out, obviously took all the soil out, they poured the pad, and so this is just one of the progress billing portions of that. If you will notice, the soil is still sitting over there on one of our bituminous surfaces. We're still waiting for one test result to come back before jerky can load up all the dirt and send it to the landfill. The landfill is requesting a third different type of test to make sure that they know if there's any type of contaminants in there, which would be obviously just fuel oil from the transmission. So even though the soil's sitting over there, he's done all the work. He just needs to come back and pick it up at that point. But the pad's complete, ready to go. All the foundation stuff is ready to go. All the excavating is done. So this is just that kind of progress bill for their work being completed on the pad.
Okay.
I'll make the motion to approve requisition 8638 for that new pad installation.
I'll second.
All right, motion by Bob and second by Matt to approve requisition 8638, progress billing on the transformer pad. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, next we have approved the awarding bid for the interactive photovoltaic system.
So just an update from the special meeting we had last week where you guys can review the bid proposals. We talked about different scenarios as far as rates, different project sizes. The sense I got from the special meeting is that there seemed to be some consensus about moving forward with a project like that and self-funding that. So we put the item back in front of you guys today for consideration of approving moving forward with the system. Again, our staff's recommendation at that point was going with the Ziegler system. It was the lowest overall project cost and also the lowest cost per kilowatt hour for the system. It also doesn't fill up the entire site at this point, so if there's future thoughts of adding on over time, either additional power supply for our own diversification or adding on things that maybe the community wants, we have the ability to do that. It doesn't put anything in the easements at this point, which is a nice thing for us to do. So it's really a consideration for board if you guys would like to move forward with the project.
Is that your long-term preference, is to avoid that easement if we can?
My first preference is to not have anything built on that site that has occupancy, which I think we're accomplishing that. I'm not so worried about not putting anything over the easement as long as we can move it if we need to. If we have to get in and do something on that, we have to do telescopic surveys and things like that, but we can run those things through the pipeline in different areas. The biggest thing would be if something happens up there in that area where we have to excavate and pull off, we just have to be able to remove things. So I'm not as concerned about the movability of things in the easement as I am someone building a facility up there with people. So I think we're in a good shape from that standpoint. So.
Probably to Jeremy's point though, this right size is a size of a project without going into there, and if we choose to expand over the easement at some point, we can make that conscious decision then, but as stated, it feels appropriate.
Yeah, or if you go a couple smaller scale systems, you could stay out of the easement and still add in several 40 to 60, 80 kilowatt systems too, so.
Still your recommendation with the Ziegler? Obviously, it's in the board action form, but it still feels appropriate to staff?
Yep.
Any other questions or discussion?
I think they did a nice job vetting this project.
Yeah, I agree. All the information you guys provided last time was, I think, right on. Gave us everything we needed.
Plus, I also sent you guys some stuff on what's going on in Rochester. I know that was brought up. I think Anthony, you had mentioned that. So you can see a lot of these projects, the PPA structures work in a lot of areas, but they are more costly to get into those types of structures. And
I just don't understand why other municipals haven't done this yet.
some of it's need, some of it's, they don't have the, to be honest with you, they don't have the cash flow that we have. You know, a lot of these smaller utilities are just, they don't have reserves. They're running on 30, 60 days total operating cash. Co-ops are the same way. They run on thin margins on cash in some of those areas. I do think if you see renewable standards changing and where they're going to push utilities, municipal, and co-ops into that stuff, then they're going to have to do that. But right now, they're not forced to do that. We have luxury. We have, you know, competitive rates. We're sound financially. We have the ability to start moving that direction in some areas without really impacting the rates. A lot of the IOUs are running that way, but they're rolling them into rate increases to recapture that. So we're sitting in I would say in a situation where most municipal utilities in Minnesota are not. They're just not in those positions like we are. So, but I think more people are going to at least look at those things, particularly from a self-funding area. If these costs can get down in that, you know, mid-30s to 40 cents, you're going to see that. MMU is going to be doing an article on a potential project, on this project, so that will spur maybe some conversation with utilities of, hey, look at, if we can do something like this and self-fund it and not get into a PPA, this is a fairly economical way to provide some additional power supply locally. But the other piece really, for a lot of these utilities and municipals, a pretty good portion of them, they're already getting full requirement power from a wholesale supplier.
So they don't have to worry about it.
So they don't have to worry about it. Those guys are doing it on their behalf. So that's kind of another piece that happens. So we're kind of the mix of both worlds. We've got some power supply from a wholesaler, but we've got flexibility with own generation and do some of our own things too that some just don't have.
I like it.
I like it too, yeah.
All right. Entertain a motion.
So I'll make the motion for the, to approve the bid to Ziegler Power Systems for the solar array project.
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion by Matt, second by Anthony to approve the Ziegler bid on the solar array project. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Very good. Look forward to seeing how that project progresses. Item G, we have approved designated $1 million into the catastrophic fund.
So this is just a piece that I'd ask you guys to consider. Obviously, you guys have full authority to change the designations of our fund balances. The only fund balance that you really can't do anything about is our restricted cash, because those are put in place based on bond covenants. So you don't have any discretion of that. But I think it's wise for us to continually designate what we need to for the different areas within our balance sheet. So obviously, you guys know I've talked quite a bit about the machinery and boiler, and obviously our deductible is going up with Hartford to $1 million. So I'm asking you guys to consider moving our designation from $500,000 to $1 million to earmark that we have at least $1 million in fund balance designated for risk management and insurance. So still have plenty of unreserved cash. Doesn't really affect the balance sheet. You guys can change the designation anytime if you want, but it's just a way to earmark that to show that we're cognizant of the risk management from the boiler insurance standpoint.
I have no problem with the motion and making that, increasing that to $1 million. Just seeing the feedback from the carriers is what causes me a bit of concern.
Yep.
For the future of what our premiums could do if there's not enough competition to keep them in check. So I'd make a motion to approve the increase in the catastrophic reserve fund to $1 million.
I'll second that.
All right, motion by Anthony, second by Bob to approve the designation of $1 million to the catastrophic fund. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, along that insurance question, Jeremy, do you see more competition coming in the future, potentially?
Competition as far as more carriers?
Yeah.
No, I don't, because these carriers are the major players globally. Did I tell you I talked to the Rochester? Did I tell you guys that? I don't remember if I did or not. I don't know. I talked with their lady down there that's in charge of risk management for Rochester Public Utilities. They belong to I can't remember the acronym, but it's a larger utility group that gets together and looks for insurances. And so I explained to her kind of what we're seeing, and she said, well, welcome to the club, we're in the same boat you are. She said their insurance carrier that they've been with just raised their premiums 200% in the last 2 years. And she said what they're finding with these carriers, and they're looking at the same carriers we are, is they just don't want to be really in the machinery boiler. It's too risky, they're paying out too much premiums. So what they're going through this year, and this is something I've been thinking about, something I would have you guys think about as well. What they're going to do is they're going to hire an engineering firm to come in, or a firm to come in and do an actual risk assessment, overall scope of their entire facilities. And really what she's looking to get out of it is should we only insure a few items and not insure the rest to see if we can reduce the premiums that way? So
Essentially, you'd self-insure.
Right, that's basically what you're doing. So I've talked about that here with Jared, and our biggest risks are the plant 2 and plant 1. I'm not as concerned about our distribution transmission systems, because as we've seen in this one, to redo this whole transmission plant up there, you're looking at $1 million, $1.3 million. You can self-insure those types of things. A lot of our smaller interconnect stations, a lot of our conductor, that's all underground, so you're not gonna have major issues with that. Transmission lines, those aren't major costs. The big concern for me up there is if that plant goes kaput, we have a major issue up there. We're never gonna get nearly the value that we're getting out of what it costs to put that in, because they're gonna evaluate that on a resale value in the market, and no one's gonna place a high value on a plant like that anymore. It's obsolete relative to where the markets are going. So we're gonna have a reduced valuation coming in on that piece. The piece that's problematic for that particular plant right now is you've got it tied to long-term contracts, right? They're tied to capacity, 40 megawatts of capacity. So we would still need to supply that capacity through those bilateral agreements. So if you didn't get that plant back up and operational, we would have to procure 40 megawatts of capacity from somewhere else. You're talking a couple $1 million probably a year to provide that. So you could do that. That one, you probably, if something major happens at that plant, I would probably at this point not recommend that you would replace a like plant like that. You'd get the proceeds that you would get from that, and you would decide, do you want to add some more medium-sized generators in, or a new type of facility, or are we fine buying off the market with the local generation we have left at plant one and move forward from there? So those are some considerations. The piece with the downtown plant that is a little risky for me when I look at the plant is we don't have those units walled off, firewalled between generators. So if one has a major issue or it blows up, it could take out another one and another one. Now, the likelihood of those things going kaput and just like a huge catastrophic issue probably isn't likely. You're probably, you probably blow out some pistons, or you have some issue down there, mechanical failure. But I worry more about it knocking out 2 and 3, and those are, $5 to $10 million a piece in valuation like that happen. So that one is a little more, and those are more quick, those are quick starters. Those are more have immediate impact in the industry that we're in today, and so you would want to replace those things. Those 2 plants are probably the bigger area where you probably don't have enough capital to self-insure a major issue. If it's a fire-related issue, well, that's covered by the league. But if it's a major catastrophic piece of equipment that malfunctions and does something majorly catastrophic, you're probably not going to just put $12 to $15 million in the reserve and say, hey, we're going to sit on this for the what-if scenario. So those 2 you probably can't self-insure. Those 2 plants with the size of assets and valuation there. But you could look at it and go, hey, we only want to get into a machinery boiler insurance for plant 1 and 2. Everything else will self-insure. And we would have minimal risk exposure there with that, as long as we keep a decent cash reserve balance on hand. So those are some things that Rochester's going to go through. They're actually going to do a full-blown study and go, where can we just self-insure stuff, and where do we absolutely want that piece. The other piece for us that we'd have to look at, as they do too, is they're tied to the transmission grid. They've got transmission facilities like we are, and so, can we self-insure that fund, or some of these areas like GRE, because we're in their zone, and in the MISO, would they allow us to self-insure that? Do they want us to have additional coverage on those things? Because our stuff is connected to the overall grid, and how quickly could you get things back to the normal? But so those are some things we're thinking about.
I wonder what the overall benefit of that would end up being, though, because I would assume that the majority of our costs are connected to those larger pieces anyway.
Correct.
That the things you're going to take off aren't the things that are costing us on the premium end.
Yeah, really, it's two big plants. I mean, that's where a lot of your valuation is. I mean, we've got a significant amount of valuation in the pipeline, but there's no really mechanical parts and things of that nature in there that you're getting that additional coverage for.
Yeah, I think this is I don't know what this is telling me, but it's telling me something, right? There's dynamics and market changing, and right now we have a carrier, but maybe in 2 years we don't. So we have to be prepared for the potential of that. So maybe the study, maybe the self-insured, maybe trimming back what's actually covered, at least having the thought process and the foundation set for when they do throw us that curveball and we don't have a carrier.
Well, I wonder, I think you talked about it once too, the industry coming together and forming its own group, to ensure these
That's
kinds of
kind of what
things.
Rochester
Yeah, we talked about the self-insured piece. They're in that group. They try to get buying power by having a bunch of utilities go to the carrier and say, hey, we'd all like the same type of thing, but it really isn't carrying. She basically isn't really carrying any weight.
It only works if there's competition. Nobody wants to bid on it.
Well, and I've seen trucking companies do that, various trucking companies come together to form their own insurance so they can actually get a cost that's effective for them. So maybe something will come of it in the future.
Yeah, I thought, if it gets to that point, I can tell you a lot of the Midwest utilities down south, Oklahoma, Nebraska, those areas, they self-insure everything. Jared and I, we go to conferences, we go to risk management things. People don't carry any of that type of insurance. They self-insure everything. They
Right.
just
Right, in Tornado Alley, huh?
Right.
I'm
They
just thinking
go, hey,
tornado alley.
something happens, we'll fix that segment of line, or we'll fix that transmission, but they just self-insure everything.
Yeah, I think put it on your list in 2021 to think and study on that, Jeremy. I think we have to rethink This is telling me the way we've historically insured probably isn't gonna be around forever.
Yeah, it's a major risk that's coming. We just don't know exactly when.
Or you're gonna have volatility, right?
Yeah, I think there'll
based
be a
on-
market, it'll just be at what price,
Yeah.
you know?
Right. And that's basically what everyone is telling me is, the market's just going out now because all the things that have happened, right? All the fires, all the, I mean, they have to recover that, not only the insurer, but the secondary insurer that's insuring the insurance company has to recover those things, and so they're dictating, you have to charge us premium to recover losses, and so
And they have to do it.
5, 7 years from now, and maybe the price comes back down.
They have to do it across the board to recover it too. They can't just place it in the areas that are the highest risk, so.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, last item on the agenda today is the agreement with the City of Brown for meter reading services.
Did we approve the fund balance? Okay. So this is,
Yeah, we did.
okay. So this is just an amendment or revised agreement that's put in front of you. So we approved one, I think, several months ago. It was just for the electric billing side of things. They now have installed all their water meters down there. I think they're getting close. I think they only have a handful left. But they essentially just want us to read their water meters as well. So this is an amended agreement where we're just adding in the water meter, essentially reads into the data file that we already are collecting with electric and gas. So I told them they had to sign a contract to make sure it was approved before I sent it in front of our board. And so Lori got it back to me from Broughton, and so I'm just asking you guys to approve the amended agreement, adding in that function.
Seems pretty straightforward to me.
I've never seen the word breaching and non-breaching used so many times in one paragraph.
Oh, well. There it is. And they're super appreciative, by the way, that we're providing, helping them provide those services.
Need a motion?
We do.
I'll make the motion to approve the contract.
I'll second it.
All right, motion by Bob and second by Matt to approve the agreement with the City of Brown for meter reading services. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. We cover everything, Jeremy?
That's all I got today, that's enough.
All
So you
right.
guys got something else you wanna,
No, I don't.
that's all I have.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All right. Motion by Anthony and second by Matt to adjourn. All in favor signify by saying